Like all of you, I began my story as a bright-eyed, curious, inventive child, intent on exploring the world. And I was very lucky. I had interesting parents who had traveled the globe, written novels, invented things. So I was encouraged and allowed to explore and learn on my own. That system worked for me. But when I went to junior high, disaster struck. This is a dramatization, but that's how it felt. I found myself stuck in a system that was more concerned with authority staying in the box than with actually learning. And I was desperately depressed. I asked myself, was there any way out? Was there another way? I asked myself, are the doors to this school-cum-prison actually locked? I tested it, and they weren't. I ran out those doors, and I never looked back. In a few months, I made it to Dalhousie University in my hometown, and it was wondrous. It was a little difficult. I was pretty young there, but I was ready to learn. And as my studies continued, I found myself increasingly confident in my abilities to invent and understand the world, and compelled to do my part to make a difference in it. Along with many others, it was a dawning realization that the problems of my generation were all connected to energy. And when I asked myself what was the most important thing I could personally do, I thought I could contribute to the energy problem, how to produce energy sustainably, to power our growth forever. And I joined up one of the world's most inspiring efforts in doing this, nuclear fusion, harnessing the power that powers all of the stars. The greatest of these projects in scale and funding is ITER. It means the way in Latin. That graduate student there in blue is for scale. And initially I was awe-inspired by the whole project. But eventually I wondered how much of a difference I could really make. And soon I asked myself about the other problems. The price tag was ballooning, and commercialization would be delayed until 2050. As the climate science became more and more clear, I was concerned that it would not be able to make a difference in time. You've seen graphs like this, but this was what really convinced me. It's a graph of temperature rise versus time. By the time that the mainline fusion research became commercially viable, the war may have already been lost. What I needed was a plan of my own. And all around me, people of my generation were making their own fortunes and becoming people of their own means through startups and finance. So I headed off to Silicon Valley. A beautiful atmosphere of possibility pulled me to that place. And I tried to make my own way, figure out how I could make my own resources so I could fund the energy research that I thought could make a difference in time. When I started out, I had no network there. So I went online. I wrote essays about my ideas, observations, insights, even failures. I posted many of them on an area that lots of entrepreneurs congregate, and they reached out to me. I took the meetings, and I made extremely helpful friends, all of which have become extraordinarily successful and influential entrepreneurs and investors in their own right. I slept on couches. I actually made dumplings to pay my own way. I took odd jobs, and I tried to learn from the examples of legends throughout history, like Steve Jobs or Thomas Edison or Elon Musk, who I think is truly changing the world. I explored all sorts of different ideas, but in the end, none truly pulled me as powerfully as the energy problem. So of the dozens of ideas I came up with, the one I kept working on had to do with how to produce energy and store it very effectively. So here's the context. Renewable energy was declining in cost throughout my entire life and throughout the life of the fusion energy program. In fact, in increasing numbers of places, renewable energy was the lowest cost source of power, dramatically lower cost than conventional sources of fuel. Effectively, most of these things are still powered by fusion in the sky. But the problem is that renewable energy is intermittent. No solar when the sun goes down, and the wind can go calm. And the obvious answer, the apparent answer, is to use batteries. But there are many challenges with this. They're too expensive, they're resource constrained, and they operate by dissolving, reacting, and then replating. They degrade too rapidly in so doing. So I asked myself, what if we stored energy in air? It's limitless. It's inexpensive. Air compressors last a long time, so do tanks. People assumed that it was inefficient, but digging into the fundamentals, I asked if it was a necessary truth. And most of the inefficiency came from a single factor. When you compress air, it gets hot. Hotter air reaches higher pressure. Higher pressure means you have to do more work to compress it. But to compress it to reasonable pressures, you reach extreme temperatures. If you did it all in one step, it would reach more than 1,000 degrees C. There was no practical way before us to store that energy and recover it as usable energy. So we had an idea. What you want is for the air to be as cold as possible during compression and as warm as possible during expansion. We cool the air during compression by spraying in a very fine, very dense water mist. And we heat the air up by spraying in the warmed water or warmed from any other heat source, like solar thermal or a waste heat. This idea truly captured me. It also captured the minds of some of the smartest people I knew, who joined me as co-founders. One of them funded the initial efforts. Another actually had a machine shop in his garage, and there we built our very first prototype. It doesn't look like much. It's the simplest, fastest possible thing that could demonstrate the basic process. But soon, this allowed us to raise our first outside money, and we scaled up to industrial scale, modifying an industrial compressor. This showed our basic process, the water spray, compression, and expansion operating rapidly with no trade-off in power, and in fact, better power, better performance than other people had reached, but higher efficiency. After that, we'd proven the basic science, checking all sorts of different things. We demonstrated that it was a robust process. Many folks said it was impossible, but we proved them wrong. We formulated a goal, the economic parameters that an efficient, low-cost, renewable energy plus energy storage solution would have to hit to reduce the cost of electricity, be less expensive than conventional sources of power. We began design on the machine, made our plan, raised more than $58 million of private capital, built our team, and then we built the machine. On the left is what we believe is the world's most efficient air compressor, also the most flexible, high compression ratios, and it can work as an expander. And on the right is an air tank that is not only the lightest weight, but it is also the least expensive air tank of anything that we've been able to find by a large factor, more than a factor of 2. Over the next 2 years, we will do our first field demonstrations. We'll scale across North America. We have a project in development in France. And hopefully, if all goes to plan, we'll actually achieve profitability and be able to scale up to planetary scale. It's deeply satisfying work. We're not there yet, but the world is waking up. It's ideas like this that are desperately needed. This was a picture from just Sunday. 400,000 people strong marched in New York and demanded climate action. Now, we're not a success yet. We've gotten this far. But with people like you, we could truly make the difference. We had no specialty in energy or mechanical engineering. But with ideas, with effort, with commitment, perhaps together we can figure out how to sustainably power the world. Thank you very much.